James had never looked forward to Emily's annual work parties. He went out of obligation, not enthusiasm, feeling out of place in his worn suit amid the sleek, ambitious crowd that buzzed under the city lights of Chicago. The rooftop venue shimmered with conversations and clinking glasses, the skyline a breathtaking backdrop, but none of it could shake the growing discomfort in his chest. Emily, on the other hand, seemed entirely at ease, slipping through the crowd with effortless charm, her laughter cutting through the ambient noise, her touch lingering a bit too long on her colleague's arms. As James lingered near the bar, his drink cold in his hand, he couldn't help but notice the glances and whispers around him. Groups of Emily's co-workers exchanged knowing smirks, their eyes sliding over to him with an edge that felt sharper than any insult. He took a slow breath, his grip tightening on his glass. Something was off, a faint but undeniable chill in the air that prickled at his nerves. Then he saw her moving to the crowd with that familiar, graceful stride. But she wasn't alone. A man, tall with a smug smirk plastered across his face, walked beside her, his hand casually brushing her lower back. The sight struck James like a physical blow, a cold, twisting blade in his gut. The man caught James's eye, his grin widening as they closed the distance. "You're her husband?" the man sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "I'm Jake. I'm going to dance with her now." Before James could respond, Emily let out a light, dismissive laugh, flipping her hair over one shoulder. "You don't need his permission, Jake," she said, her tone casual, almost bored. "Come on." James felt the world narrow, his vision tunneling as her words sank in. The casual, almost offhand betrayal hit him harder than any insult. The crowd around them, sensing the tension, began to quiet, their murmurs turning into a hushed, watchful silence. Jake, catching the slight quiver in James's clenched jaw, leaned in closer to Emily, his hands slipping beneath the fabric of her blouse, his fingers playing possessively against her skin. Something in James snapped. His breath came in short, sharp bursts as he forced himself to remain still, his mind teetering on a knife's edge. He felt his hand drift to his jacket, fingers brushing the cool, unyielding metal of his concealed sidearm. He didn't fully draw it, just enough to make his point clear, the dull gleam catching Jake's eye. "Step away from her," James growled, his voice low and steady, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Jake's eyes flicked to the gun, then back to James. His smirk never faltered, his arrogance swelling as he took a half-step closer to Emily, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "What's the matter, James?" he taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. "Afraid she might like me better?" James felt his pulse hammering in his ears, his jaw clenching so tightly it sent a sharp ache radiating down his neck. Emily, for her part, remained silent, her face an unreadable mask, eyes focused on some distant point beyond the scene unfolding around her. Without warning, Jake leaned in, his lips inches from Emily's cheek, as if daring James to act. That was it. James closed the distance in a single stride, his fist connecting with Jake's jaw in a sharp, brutal arc. The crack of bone on bone echoed across the rooftop, shattering the stunned silence. Jake staggered back, his hand flying to his face, a snarl of pain twisting his features as he crashed into a nearby table, sending glasses and half-finished cocktails clattering to the floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some guests stumbling back, others frozen in place as if trapped in a slow-motion nightmare. Jake's smug grin had dissolved into a twisted mass of rage and shock, his eyes blazing with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Emily still hadn't moved. She stood there, a statue among the chaos, her face pale, her expression unreadable. James straightened, his breath coming in harsh, ragged pulls as he let his fist drop to his side. The weight of his actions settled on him, heavy and cold. He had crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed, shattering the brittle facade of his marriage in a single, irreversible moment. As security surged forward, grabbing the still reeling Jake and dragging him away, murmurs of shock and disbelief swept through the crowd. James held his ground, his fists still clenched, his pulse still roaring in his ears. He spared Emily one last lingering glance, a silent, bitter farewell to the life they had shared, before turning and walking to the stunned onlookers, his back straight, his heart as cold as a Chicago night. The rooftop's once vibrant hum had dissolved into scattered whispers and clinking glass shards, a fractured echo of what the night had been. But for James, the finality of his choice resonated louder than any whispered judgment, a quiet, enduring echo of a broken trust. As the echoes of strained conversations and clinking glasses faded into the cool night, Jake found himself being escorted out, the sharp eyes of the guests following him. His once cocky demeanor had crumbled, shoulders hunched under the weight of humiliation, his smirk replaced by a bitter grimace. James watched, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Jake's exit wasn't just a retreat. It was a reckoning, a public unmasking of arrogance stripped bare. But the sense of justice that flickered in James's chest was short-lived. Emily, who had stood silent through the chaos, suddenly erupted, her voice cutting through the murmurs like shattered glass. Tears streaked her cheeks, her eyes blazing as she turned on James. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she spat, her words jagged with anger and desperation. "You've ruined everything." She hurled accusations at him, her voice rising, drawing the eyes of her colleagues. Not once did she acknowledge Jake's betrayal or her own role in the unfolding disaster. Instead, she cast James as a villain, the one who had shattered the illusion she had so carefully constructed. The room's mood shifted. The fleeting sympathy that had momentarily surrounded James turned icy, hardening into a collective judgment. He could feel their eyes, sharp with silent criticism, and for a moment he stood alone, the unwelcome center of a collapsing world. But as the days passed, the full truth emerged, unraveling like a frayed thread. Jake's public humiliation had merely been the tip of a much deeper betrayal. What James had mistaken for a one-time lapse of judgment was, in fact, the climax of a months-long affair between Jake and Emily. The signs had been there, stolen glances, whispered secrets, too much laughter at shared inside jokes. It became painfully clear that nearly everyone in her office had known. Their whispered conversations and sideways glances added layers to his embarrassment. James, it turned out, had been the last to see the truth. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Emily, once the darling of her workplace, found herself shunned, her reputation crumbling as colleagues distanced themselves from the scandal. Jake, too, faced immediate consequences. His arrogant antics at the party were formally reported, and within weeks he found himself without a job, terminated for misconduct. Their reckless choices had ignited a fire that consumed not only their personal lives, but their professional ones as well. For James, the path forward became starkly clear. He would not let guilt, manipulation, or misplaced loyalty keep him chained to a relationship built on deception. He filed for divorce without hesitation, a move that felt both painful and liberating. While the legal battle that followed was exhausting, it also marked a turning point, a moment when he chose to prioritize his self-respect over a broken commitment. As the dust settled, James reflected on the lessons he had gained through the ordeal. He came to understand that staying in a toxic relationship would have cost him far more than just his marriage. It would have cost him his sense of self, his dignity, and his peace of mind. By walking away, he reclaimed not just his freedom but his power to define his own worth. It was a harsh, uninvited clarity, but one that ultimately set him free. In the end, James emerged from the wreckage carrying a hard-won lesson. You can't control someone else's loyalty, he would later reflect, but you can choose how much of yourself you're willing to lose for them. These words, simple yet profound, captured the essence of his journey. In choosing to leave, James didn't just end a toxic marriage. He reclaimed his future. And in doing so, he offers a silent reminder to anyone who might find themselves at a similar crossroads. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's breaking you, so you can build the life you truly deserve.